case involved a man in New Brunswick by the name of Gerard Comeau, who had just been charged under the province's Liquor Control Act. That act prohibits anyone from having more than 12 pints of beer unless you buy it at a provincial liquor store.
We realized we had a good test case because, and I say this with admiration, Mr. Comeau is Joe Canadian. He is so relatable.
Gerard enjoys his beer.
Good stuff.
He says he doesn't drink much, maybe just one or two when he cooks. But it was how he purchased his beer that made his name known.
See you in the coffee shop. Oh, you're going to be popular, but they're going to put your face on the $20 bill. But I wasn't impressed more than that. Like, I'm just an easygoing guy, so...
One day, back in October 2012, Gerard did the same thing he does 2 or 3 times a year. He got into his Honda Accord, drove the 2 hours from Tracadie to Campbellton, New Brunswick, and over the bridge into Quebec.
I went where I usually go, buy beer.
He hit 3 stores and stocked up. A bunch of beer and...
2 bottles of whiskey and 1 bottle of Stinger Premier X. It's a triple X liqueur.
Little did he know he was being watched.
Yeah, like they watched me.
Court documents say the Campbellton RCMP were concerned about New Brunswickers coming into Quebec to buy beer. So they set up a sting.
And I came to take the road to come back this way at home there, and I seen this old car in front of me.
As Gerard drove over the bridge, crossing back into New Brunswick, there was an old car going slowly.
As soon as I got a chance to pass him, the lights came on, and then when he pulled me over, I pulled over, and then these 2 cop cars showed up, and then from there on, they see my beer.
Gerard's beer was a lot more than the 12 pints he was allowed. 48 bottles each of Sleeman's Light, Miller Genuine Draft, and Molson M. 3 cases of Bud, Bud Light, and Coors Light, plus the 3 bottles of spirits. He was slapped with a fine for close to $300. But it wasn't just the money. Gerard was going to have a record for committing a provincial offense. So when a lawyer, Arnold Schweisberg, offered to fight his case in court, he agreed. The costs were being paid by the Canadian Constitution Foundation. That's a charity that says it works to stop the government from stepping on people's rights and freedoms.
First of all, he was delighted that he wasn't going to have to incur legal expenses. And the second part of his motivation was he genuinely thought that it was wrong.
Well, it just made common sense. You can go buy any material anywhere in Canada. You can go buy 20 shirts in Quebec or Rolla. Why wouldn't you be able to buy beer?
For Arnold, it was about more than just beer. He wanted to tear down the internal barriers that prevented free trade of any product within Canada. And he thought the foundation for his case had been planted in 1867 in the Constitution by the Fathers of Confederation.
They were a very smart group of men. Yeah, they were all men. They was back in the day.
In Section 121, they wrote that all articles of growth, produce, or manufacture shall be admitted free into each of the other provinces.
A free trade zone. And that's what Canada was supposed to be. Now, you read that to an ordinary person, there's no ambiguity there. It simply says admitted free.
So in court, Arnold argued free should mean free. On the other side of the case was Crown Counsel Bill Richards. He spent hours pondering the meaning of Section 121. What had the Fathers of Confederation really meant when they talked about free trade? And in the end, Bill disagreed with Arnold's literal interpretation. He argued,
the opposite. Free doesn't mean free. No one could indicate any background discussion that occurred in respect to Section 121. There are no notes or minutes taken at meetings. There's no documentary evidence as to what the fathers were thinking when this was discussed or what they were saying.
Bill argued that the Fathers of Confederation had laid out a system of federalism, where provinces had powers locally.
Each province, each colony that entered Federation had their local cultures, their local interests, and if that wasn't the case, why have a premier if they're not there to protect, to enhance, to develop local potential, local interests? And that was one of the primary concerns when the Fathers of Confederation met to design how this country was going to work.
The provincial initial judge's ruling was over 80 pages long.
Like most lawyers, I read the last page first. And I read the last page first, and I literally had a flush come over my entire body.
The New Brunswick judge has ruled that restrictions on taking alcohol across provincial borders violate the Constitution's free trade provisions.
I think the judge wanted to tell his neighbors that he didn't believe any of them were provincial offenders for going to a Quebec beer run. It's brave and comprehensive. Great job.
Yeah, well, I was taken aback. I was taken aback by it.
For people looking for cheaper booze, this was a win. But Bill Richards wasn't happy with the outcome. He felt it was an important constitutional challenge that needed to be taken to the Supreme Court. His colleagues had their doubts.
They looked at me as if I was embarrassed. They said, look, you've lost, but you went to the Supreme Court. I said, did the Supreme Court take this?
Some people in Bill's office even set up a bet about whether he'd get his chance. Their wager? A bottle of scotch. He was right.
It's a fascinating case.
So, Bill collected his scotch and in December 2017 headed off to Ottawa.
Her Majesty the Queen versus Gerard Comeau.
By now, it was a full 5 years since Gerard Comeau got his ticket.
For the Intervenor Attorney General of Canada.
I realized that this had the potential to affect virtually every aspect of the Canadian internal economy. But I also recognized that there would be billions and billions of dollars of interests that would make it very, very difficult to bring about this change.
The courtroom was full, so they set up a monitor outside for people to watch.
Every single attorney general in the country sent lawyers because all of the provinces have vested economic interests in maintaining trade corridors.
Yeah, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, cannabis culture. I mean, there's a lot of interest in this, particularly business people had the idea that it was going to create havoc with their businesses.
It was a dignified circus.
Address a few of the concerns that have been
The
expressed.
case went on for 2 days.
The uncertainty for the future.
Interveners from the wine and beer industries argued Section 121 should give them a constitutional right to sell their alcohol in other provinces. The provinces argued for keeping their control of liquor sales. BC said government-owned monopolies are an effective way of addressing the problems of alcohol, and a crucial way to do that is through price setting. Alcohol sales also create a source of revenue to offset some of the public costs of drinking. A few months later, on April 19, 2018, the court released its decision.
Canada's highest court has ruled against a New Brunswick man. He tried to carry a load of alcohol.
The justices ruled that provinces cannot impose tariffs or taxes, but they can make laws that end up restricting or slowing trade. And they wrote that interpreting the Constitution to be calling for truly free trade would undermine federalism, which is built upon regional diversity within a single nation.
Here on the Quebec side, New Brunswickers do
Reaction was mixed.
flabbergasted by the ruling.
That don't make sense to me. It's across the bridge. That's not like across the border into Cuba or anywhere else.
But the bridge, though it's only 7
New Brunswick's Minister for Trade, Roger Melanson, applauded the decision. He said liquor sales brought in about $170 million a year to his province.
And that's what we distributed in society in the province of New Brunswick for education services, health services, infrastructure services.
Arnold Schweisberg was disappointed. He felt the decision was giving provinces carte blanche to protect their own bottom line.
This just hands the provinces an invitation to contextualize anything they want to do. That's what it means. They can pass a measure that negatively affects trade and make up another reason for why they did it.
Of course, they're making money out of it, but it's also for safety purposes and to comply with certain standards.
Time, this may have been the final word on international trade barriers. But now, less than a decade later, U.S. President Trump's threat would be some of the same debates that were ignited during the Mo case.
I would say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me
and the addiction. These tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country.
That promise to impose tariffs is raising the question of how far politicians should go to bring down internal trade barriers to make Canada more self-sufficient.
If we had one Canadian economy instead of 13, that more than outweighs the impact.
Cut interprovincial trade barriers.
The BC government is ready to support a true labor mobility deal.
We'll take the first meaningful step to eviscerate internal provincial trade barriers.
In a video he made calling for fewer barriers, the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, even
Gerard Allen the Supreme Court, but the court wrongly denied his constitutional right to transport goods across provincial.
Oh, my first reaction was, where have you been for the last, 150 years?
Brian Lee Crowley is the managing director of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. He says, after the Comeau case, politicians didn't do enough.
We've been limping along with a system which invited the provinces to remove their own barriers. I think that's a completely fanciful notion. And if we stick with that, I don't see a lot of progress on the horizon. But if Canadians decide that they're willing to bite the bullet and remove the trade barriers and upset some of the previous
Conservatives all stated they support Canadian farmers and supply management.
I think this is a typical example of a larger problem. The average consumer would get a benefit of about 200 miles. Okay, whereas supply management.
The street would quibble with that. They'd say prices would just be more volatile.
Whereas dairy farmers get their entire livelihood from supply management, so they are really motivated, and all the politicians gosh, it's so stupid that, you know, we continue to have these barriers to trade. What's wrong with our politicians? What's wrong with our politicians? They're just people insane. The fact of the matter is that in every one of these cases, the benefit of each Canadian is quite small.
you drive in this dip, there's a wave in front of the truck. The waves are happening under the ice. And then, of course, speed, it can weaken the ice because the wave is moving faster. The friction against the ice will cause the bottom side of the ice to get thinner. And eventually you come to a point where the ice might fail. And the truck and trailer will drop into it. So they'd rather you just move slowly. And when you get on a lake, Gordon Lake at 25 kilometers an hour, it takes us almost 2 hours to drive across it. And especially when you come to shore, they ask you to go 10 kilometers an hour on approaching shore because you have to give that wave an opportunity to dissipate. If you come straight into a solid bank of dirt into the shore and you're going too fast and the wave's in front of you, what it does, it hits the shore and it comes back towards the truck. And then the dip and the wave meet. And that's sort of the wild card in the mix. So they keep an eye on us as far as the radar guns. We're maintaining a speed limit. But for me, I actually enjoy it. I mean, I don't know what it is about the northern lights at 25 kilometers an hour. 40 below and a 60-mile-an-hour wind. Like, I'll tell you, you see colors of light, you're like, holy mackerel, all these colors come from? You know, the reds and the greens and the blues, and they're just like, sometimes there's no sky almost. It's just all northern lights up there. You know, and you'll be trying to get a good look at them as you're driving down the road at your 25 kilometers an hour. It's you got a wide open space, you know. You got a lot of horizon. You got sort of like you can look a long ways, and then you have the reds and the pinks, some orange, quite a bit of orange. You know, sometime we'll get some mauve in there too, and it sort of it changes, you know, through the evening.
That was an excerpt from a documentary about ice trucker Alex Debogorski. It aired on the Sunday edition back in 2008. It was produced by Dave Miller of CBC Yellowknife. That's all for this week. The show was produced by Craig Desson with help from Anna Lazowski. Storylines is part of the CBC Audio Doc Unit. I'm Jody Martinson. Thanks for listening.
正在计算路径，请沿道路行驶47公里。
Police initially thought Bolter was in the area of the two shootings, but have now expanded their search. The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward, and Klobuchar says extra security has been provided to her and other Minnesota leaders. 2 people were killed and more than 30 were injured when a bridge collapsed in Pune in western India. A large group of tourists were on the bridge at the time. Some victims were swept down the river below. Thousands gathered in Barcelona city center today, protesting tourism and its impact on local communities. Activists argue tourism is driving up housing costs as more homes and apartments turn into short-term rentals, and they say it's degrading the environment and eroding local culture. Protesters taped off hotel entrances, set off smoke bombs near luxury stores, and squirted water pistols at shops and hotels. The demonstrations are part of a coordinated series of protests across southern Europe. In the Stanley Cup Finals,
what a spectacular goal for Brad Marchand!
Halifax native Brad Marchand scored his second goal of the game, helping the Florida Panthers beat the Oilers 5-2. That puts the Panthers up 3 games to 2. Game 6 will be played back in Sunrise, Florida on Tuesday. And that's the world this hour. Remember, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, updated every hour, 7 days a week. For CBC News, I'm Gina Louise Phillips. Weather forecast for Kenora and Port Francis. Mainly sunny today, a high of 25 degrees, the Humidex 29, and a very high UV index. Tonight, partly cloudy, a slight chance of showers overnight, and a low of 15. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and cloud, a chance of showers, risk of thunderstorms late in the afternoon, and a high of 25. And for Geraldton and Superior North, sunny today, a high of 23. Tonight, a few clouds, a low of 8 degrees. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and cloud, and a high of 26. Hi, I'm Matea Roach. Welcome to Bookends. Today on the show, what does it mean to be soft as bones? We dive into a memoir that weaves Indigenous art and history with the story of one family's resilience. And later on, a book about storytelling, identity, and fighting back against AI overlords in a dystopian Montreal. Soft as Bones is the title of Cheyenne Marie Sage's new memoir. But to just call this book a memoir doesn't really capture its full scope or range. At its heart, this book is Cheyenne's quest for a better understanding of the childhood trauma that scarred her family. Beyond that, it's also a tapestry of poetry, history, Cree language, traditional ceremony, and folklore. As Cheyenne delves into her memories and those of her family, her story becomes more than just her own. And it's a story filled with vulnerability and with love. Cheyenne Marie Sage is Cree, Métis, and Salish from Edmonton. She currently lives in New York, but she joined me in our Toronto studio for this conversation. Just to note before we get into it that this conversation covers the topic of sexual abuse, so please listen with care. You can find information about support services at endingviolencecanada.org. Hello and welcome. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm so good. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you for coming in. I want to start by talking about the title, actually. Soft as Bones is a phrase that I understand has been part of your life for a few years now. It's your Instagram handle, it's the name of your YouTube channel, and now the name of this book. What do those 3 words mean to you?
Yeah, soft as bones is this phrase that came to me, and this was years before the book was the book, and I was living in London, Ontario at the time, and I was sitting there just having my morning tea, and then in my head came the word soft as bones. So I kind of sat with it and I ruminated on it, and it kind of encapsulates my philosophy on human beings, like specifically Indigenous folks, but really all people. And it's this idea that we are equal parts strength as much as we are delicate and fragile, because our bones are our foundation. They're our building blocks. They're very strong. They give us the capability to stand and give us structure, but yet they can also break very easily. However, they also have immense capacity for healing as well. And so I just think it's this beautiful metaphor for us as human beings, like holding space for us to be strong as much as we are fragile, and allowing those to coexist together.
Yeah, I'm curious, you take us to a lot of different places that you inhabited, especially through your childhood. But one of the first places you take us to in Soft as Bones is to this acreage north of Edmonton near Morinville. And you describe it as this place that's surrounded by vast fields and an evergreen forest, and you describe it as one of the most important spaces from your childhood. Can you tell us a bit more about that acreage?
Yeah, so the acreage, I think we were there from kindergarten until about grade 3. But when I think of that space, why it's so important to me and why I bring us there is it feels like this space that was very freeing and it felt like what childhood should feel like, because it was me and my sisters in the yard, running around, climbing trees, going to the pond, catching frogs, listening to the coyotes, pulling birch paper off the trees and, telling ghost stories around the fire, and it feels like a bit of a sacred place to me because it was before a lot of the abuses in my household really started, at least towards, I know now as an adult that there were things happening with my mother behind the scenes, but at the time I didn't see that.
Yeah, a time before, I guess, you became aware of abuses that were happening in your family, before you became subject to some of that. And you talk about it so beautifully in your book. I don't want to go through necessarily the sort of beat by beat, let's go through every difficult moment that you experienced, because we can go read the book and learn about some of it. But when you're about 8 years old, you and your family move to Edmonton, and your father, Frank, gets deep into some serious criminal activity, dealing crack. You become kind of aware of this and really exposed to things that you just shouldn't be exposed to as a child of that age. Mm-hmm. And then there's this real moment of rupture, and just what sounds like an extremely difficult day for you, the day before your 13th birthday that you talk about in this memoir. Can you talk about what happened on that day, and what did you have to do? Because it's just harrowing the way you talk about it.
Yeah, it was the day that was like the culmination of everything, right? Being 12 years old and having to go into a courtroom, and we each had to write these letters of everything that we saw and that happened in the household. So I had to write down the things that I saw my dad do to my sister, and him turning cocaine into crack in our kitchen, and everything like that. And so I had to write out this letter, and finally the court date came, because there's a good amount of time leading up to that before that day actually comes. And I remember the day, it's like you remember it, I was going to say vividly, but in a way it's like a dream. I don't remember what we did before, and I don't really remember too much of what happened after. But I remember when we went into the courtroom, my mom asked, I had the choice for her or my relative to read the letter, or I could go up and read the letter. And my sister Orlean also had to do the same thing. And she chose to have our Auntie Debbie read her letter for her. And I said, no, I want to do this myself. I want to look over at him and I want to read this out loud. And so I did. So I walked up to the podium, and there he was across from me, and in his orange jumpsuit. And I started reading, and you feel so strong. I always felt like such a strong child, and very fearless, like I could kind of tackle anything. It's like, I can do this. And I went up there, and I think I read 2 sentences before I ran off the stand, sobbing, because I just saw my father over there sobbing. And then my Auntie Debbie came up, and she finished reading the letter for me. And yeah, that was the sentencing.
Yeah, what was that like? I mean, it's obviously you're reading this letter about just various terrible things that your dad put you through, put your mom and your sisters through, and then you're seeing him
crying on the other side of the courtroom in response to hearing that. Like, what did that feel like?
Yeah, it's almost like a sublime experience, and it's almost like you can't really fully be present in terms of knowing what that feels like. It's hard to be embodied in that because it's all so surreal. So I have, to be honest, I have no idea what I was thinking or feeling, because it's like there was a couple things going on. There was one, me wanting to say what I saw to help my sister, to help our family, and then there was the flip side of it where I was simultaneously recognizing that my father is no longer my father, which I wrote in that letter. I said, from this day forward, you are no longer a dad to me, you are Frank, and that is who you are. And so it was this complete rupture from what my life was into what it was going to now be.
This book is divided into 4 sections, and so this moment of real rupture, as you're saying, in the courtroom concludes actually the first section. In the second section, we get into a period of time that you spent as a teenager drinking, doing drugs, self-harming. Like, really, it sounds like trying to figure out the way that a teenager will do, how to cope with everything that was going on in your life at that time. But you also share a lot about your mom's almost backstory and her own struggles when she was growing up. What did you want readers to know about your mom? Because you don't shy away from talking about some really hard stuff in her life, but you also clearly love this woman so much, and it sounds like have a good relationship with her.
I do. She is one of my best friends. You know, I moved away to New York City, and we talk on the phone multiple times a week for like hours, and including her story. Of course, how could I write this story without her and her voice and her experience? Because I needed to go back into the past, and not just my own past, but all of our past, to understand how all of our stories came together, and how what happened in our family unit unfolded. Because on paper, you can look at a fact and think, well, oh my God, my mom fell in love with a guy that was in prison. Of course this wasn't going to go well, right? And you can insert all of these judgments for, like, what a terrible decision or this and that. But life is not that simple. Life is not black and white. And so I wanted to not just write, okay, my mom fell in love with this charming man in prison, but it was, how does one get to that point? And I think I tried my best to do this with everyone in the book, but I really want people to understand the full scope of the person, because we are not just the bad things we do, we are so much more than that. And I really wanted to do everybody justice, especially my mother, so readers could understand where she was at mentally and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, if there's like one of the top words that comes to mind when I think of this book is it's a very empathetic work towards really, I would say, everyone in your family that you describe, right? Because I think the way you describe even, you know, people that you no longer have a relationship with, it's kind of understanding that in a lot of cases, these are people that are traumatized as well, that experienced like unthinkable things when they were kids, that leads you to become an adult that maybe finds certain behaviors acceptable that are not. One of the other things that you do in the second section of the book is you weave this story of your mom's teen years and that of your own teen years with the 8 stages of a drum making ceremony that you attended when you were 14. What was important about that ceremony for you as a young person?
Oh, so much. It's an honor to be able to make your own drum, and it's not something that everybody gets to do, even if you're native. And so it felt like, how do I say it? It's like a coming of age thing, right? So now my time has come and I get to make this drum, and when you're making this drum, you're so connected to A, everyone that's there, the elder that's leading it, and then B, you really feel connected to your entire ancestors, the history, and the importance of that is so strong, because I just think about my family members who were not allowed to do that. And I'm not talking about my ancestors, I'm talking about my family members, I'm talking about my grandparents, I'm talking about my aunts and uncles who were in residential schools that are still alive today. And for me to be able to do that and have that ceremony was just a very emotional and powerful experience. Even if at the time when I'm 14, you don't feel the scope of it then, but you know that it's special and you know that you're grateful for it. And it felt like, I don't know, just such a celebration and a moment of beauty, because as much as there is a lot of difficulty in this memoir, it was really important to me to capture a lot of the beauty of my culture, because there is so much beauty and love and healing and connection in my culture, and I wanted to share a little bit of that with the rest of the world.
Someone who shows up in this book that I think has really been a catalyst of that healing and that connection to culture, not just for you, but for so many people, is your great-grandmother, your mother's grandmother, Thelma Shalafu. Can you tell us about her? Because she's been super influential, not just for you, but she's like a culturally influential major figure in this country.
Yeah, she's a badass. She's, a legendary Métis woman. She was like grandma to me growing up, obviously, because she raised my mom for most of her years. And she was the first Métis woman Senator of Canada. She was one of the Métis people that marched on over to Ottawa and was there in the House of Commons waving the Métis flags around in order to get Métis people constitutionally recognized as Indigenous people in this country. And even before that, like she started the Native Friendship Center in Slave Lake. She personally made her home a refuge for abused women who were fleeing their marriages in a time when it wasn't acceptable to do that. So her strength has really been a pillar for me throughout my whole life. And as a young kid, I loved her, I respected her, and I also kind of feared her too, because she was very stern, take no BS kind of a person. And as I got older, and as she got older too, and she retired from the Senate, she kind of softened. Her disposition softened, and so we grew so much closer, especially when everything happened with my father. My family and I, we kind of isolated ourselves a little bit from the rest of the family as a way of like cocooning ourselves and protecting, but my grandmother was very much a part of that cocoon, and it was her home that we went to, it was her bed that Arlene slept